What the heck is an NIL agent? Let's talk about it with Brian Smith on today's Locked On Badgers, plus more thoughts on the portal targets, portal quarterbacks, all that and more on Locked On Badgers. Let's go.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, y'all? Welcome to Locked On Badgers, your team every single day. Thank you for making this your first listen. We really appreciate you. I'm Ryan Herrings. You can find this on YouTube, this show on YouTube, or wherever you find podcasts. And today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions do apply. All right, we got Brian on. So I kind of told you a little bit before, as my camera again goes blurry now, I have this constant problem. People who watch this show know this, Brian. But I talked to you a little bit before the show. Wisconsin landed a transfer linebacker out of Syracuse, Leon Lowry. Pretty big get for them. They need an edge guy. 24 hours later, he decommits, points everything to all communication to his NIL agent. His NIL agent, if you look at the Twitter bio, NIL certified. Within 24 hours, that his profile was disintegrated. Like, people tore it apart. I don't want to go any more than that. Badger fans know the backstory here. But what the heck is an NIL agent? Are they needed? How prevalent is this? Enlighten us, please.
Sure. There are a lot of ways to look at this, and it's pretty much an endless loop of bad. Unless you're hiring a certified like NFL agent, certified somebody that's a lawyer. I don't even know if you can hire an NFL agent. I guess that would make you ineligible. You're pretty much, you need somebody that's just a friend. You cannot trust a random guy that was some 7-on-7 coach that you ran into. It's not how it works. Now, a lot of these kids don't want to spend any money on something. There is no shortcut. If you don't hire a lawyer that's a contract lawyer, that's a street agent. Basically what it is. This kid made a terrible decision. Not a bad one. Terrible. So there are a bunch of guys like this in the recruiting world. I can't use the words that we use among recruiting analysts on this show without being fired for what we call them. So I'll leave it at that. But there's no way Wisconsin could have known that was coming. That's the other part of it. Like, Wisconsin's not going to, there's nobody on that staff or in the AD's office or assistant AD that wouldn't have said, no, this is red flag. Next guy up. You're not going to deal with drama. They're not. That's one of the reasons that Fickell has made it to being the head coach at the University of Wisconsin. Push the crap away. Stay focused on the task. NIL agent is just another name for street agent or scumbag, something like that, looking to make money when he should.
Well, and that's it. It feels like this is one of those unintended consequences of, excuse me, we want players to be able to profit off their name, image, and likeness and make money. And you guys bring so much, you have so much profitability potentially. Well, with that comes this whole kind of group of people who are going to say, well, geez, I think I can make a buck off that guy too.
That's all it is. Again, just because you know somebody doesn't make them qualified to be an agent. Most agents go to law school or business school or have run their own business or a combination thereof. And it's like 99%. There's a reason for that.
Right.
Because your mom's cousin's daughter's kid knew about this guy, doesn't make him qualified. You have to spend the money. No shortcut.
How prevalent is this? Does every kid have?
So, I don't know, man.
Oh, sorry. I think we're cutting out a little bit. You're in hotel.
Oh, no. I mean, yeah, I've got hotel Wi-Fi. I'm in Tuscaloosa watching the Alabama State Final. So if I cut out, it is what it is, man. I mean, it is what it is. Yeah, look, you don't need an agent, and really good players, they just handle it themselves. They'll get an inbox on Twitter or something like that, or X, whatever you want to call it, and they just call the coach because they're highly coveted. It's the kid that isn't as highly coveted or just really feels like he needs to figure out what the market is. And that's the question. That part is all over the place. I don't know if you or any of your Badger fans saw the stuff yesterday with Florida State and Patrick Payton. That is not a good situation because regardless if he comes back or not. At some point, you have X amount of money for everybody. Recruit, players on campus, and transfer, which, you have X. When somebody pushes the pile for, just one player, he wants all, it screws it up. Team chemistry and everything. And that's why coaches don't like NIL. They know that if one kid gets a special deal, it ticks off everybody else. Then the coach loses control. Florida State's got a problem that's not their fault. Because there's some other kids now that want some of that too, is what I've been told. And that is not a good sign at all.
Well, let's talk about that really quick, because Badger fans may not have followed that, and I only know kind of the headlines of it. So Patrick Payton, defensive lineman, Florida State. He wants this was reported, so we can talk about it. He wants $1 million roughly. Is that accurate?
That's the thing. Like, if you flip on ESPN, Adam Schefter is as connected in his industry as anybody there is. I think we can all pretty much figure that out. And he'll say the terms of the contract are going to be around X amount, this, that, and it's for this many years. Yeah, the number $1 million was floated, but here are my questions. How many years? Because Peyton has only been there 3 years and he redshirted, so he has 2 years of eligibility. Is that a 2-year or 1-year contract? Kind of important. Is there anything that's a stipend? Like, is there any money up front? Are there any circumstances where he has to hit certain measurables to get all the money? I know none of that. When would he get it? That's all private. The institution is not going to have a press conference about it. So it's impossible, and it's my job, but it's impossible to find out what's going on with that. Like, even if I have Patrick on my show, do you really think he's going to give all, like, if they paid it, let's just say he's going to divulge it? It's his private business. No, not very likely. So it's unfortunate, but yeah, he put out a tweet that he was going to go in the portal. It got deleted later. It's funny. I'd set up a live stream to talk about it. In the meantime, it was deleted. And so I still had the live stream. I said, look, I don't know what's going on. It's been deleted. We're just going to talk about this generally. The show did well. People are interested, and so am I. I'm like a fan with this because I cover recruiting, but the NIL stuff makes the transfer portal wild because it's backdoor deals. It's people getting pulled out of whatever, pick a program, and I know Patrick Payton, but there's a kid at some smaller school. He's balling. Boy, Alabama needs a player at that spot. Don't tell me that there isn't a booster. Nick Saban ain't got nothing to do with it. If you come, my company, we got money, we'll give you an NIL deal. It's going to happen. How do you stop that?
Yeah, and I think the line that you draw from this too, from Florida State defense lineman from any school to Wisconsin, is this can happen anywhere. Let's say Wisconsin, we talked
100%.
about Dylan Jones a lot. I'm just going to throw that name. Let's say he balls out next year. He has an unbelievable freshman year.
Yeah.
What's going to stop any player from saying, all right, I want more now? And then how
That's
does
the
coach
problem.
What's the roadmap for coaches handling that at this point?
There are two things. Number one, if you take an underclassman that has multiple years, at some point that's going to happen. That's one. Number two, I also think, although they will not admit it, they'd lie on their mother's grave that they'd rather have 1-year quarterbacks in particular, because you can't ask for more money next year. You're gone. You know exactly what you're getting. A lot of teams are just trying to get 1-year quarterback. Notre Dame's kind of went with that. Is that coincidence? Part of its experience, but if you want to take a 1-year guy, here's the deal. And they set him up with like Under Armour or whatever, and they kind of deal with it. They don't have to mess with it, and then they're gone. I think that's the way. The underclassmen transfer, I don't think they're going to get big NIL from the Georgias and Alabamas because they don't want to jack with their team chemistry. They get too many good recruits anyway. It's risky for a team like Wisconsin, Michigan State, South Carolina, teams that are like, they go to bowls, but they want to take that next step. You're taking high risk taking an underclassman that's going to be a sophomore, because if he balls out as a junior, if I'm going to come back for my senior year, you got to pay me 1.2 or whatever. They can't do it because then you tick off everybody else in the locker room.
Right.
You know what I mean? And even if they were okay with it, there are certain schools, their NIL is crazy. Like Oregon has Phil Knight. You can't, that's the ultimate booster. But even if they should win it every year. If he wanted to pay, he's a billionaire. They'd win it every year. He's not willing to do that, obviously. So what about the school that has X amount? Even if the roster is cool with it, you still put that money into one player. Well, you got other needs. You need a corner. You need a slot receiver. You need a D tackle. It's still like the salary cap. Everybody's NIL is different. If you drop the bag on even if he's good, you're probably going to mitigate from other position coaches, and that's going to tick them off. Well, what about my guys?
Yeah.
This is tug and pull, very, very awkward. And there's nothing that like even Saban is smart. You put Saban in a room, Kirby, Dabo, all the guys in the Big Ten, Harbaugh, everybody, a lot of smart guys in the room. It's still just money. There's nothing they can do about it. At some point, there's going to be a problem if you take underclassmen transfers that are high end. That gets really tricky.
This is so interesting, man. We could do a whole show on this. Maybe we will at some point. But coming up, I need to talk to you about offseason. I need to talk to you about it for target quarterback coming from Toledo and your thoughts on Dequan Finn. We're going to talk about it next on Locked On Badgers. But first, a quick break for our friends of the show over at PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the ultimate in daily fantasy, and it's the fastest growing daily fantasy platform in North America for a reason. It's simple and it's easy to use, and you can make money doing it. What more do you want? That's what PrizePicks is there for. You're just picking more or less on 2 to 6 statistical categories for players: yards, touchdowns, receptions, whatever it is. It's as simple as that. You just pick more or less between 2 and 6 players. If those hit, the money rolls in. You don't have to worry about competing with thousands of other people from all over the world that are just crunching numbers all day. That's traditional daily fantasy. PrizePicks has flipped that on its head. It's made it faster, easier, quicker, and better. Go to prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege. Use code LOCKEDONCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. That's prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege. Use code LOCKEDONCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks, daily fantasy sports made easy. All right, let's get Brian back on here. Brian, I want to talk to you about Dequan Finn. I kind of talked about him a little bit on a show I did the other day, but I wanted your take on the Toledo quarterback. Wisconsin's very interested. They have a visit apparently lined up. He has other suitors. What are your thoughts first on Dequan Finn before we get into the fit with Wisconsin?
There are 2 or 3 things that I like. Number one, he's from Toledo, so he's played in crappy weather. He's been through that. If you're going to play for the Badgers, Michigan State, Minnesota, any of those kind of schools, at some point it's going to be windy and quite honestly not very friendly for the passing game. You need to know what that's like. Number 2, he came into college in 2019. He's experienced. He's played 5 years. He's playing this 6th year, that COVID year. This is the perfect scenario for whatever school he goes to. I'm surprised because somebody brought him up to me yesterday when I was in the Florida State chat. Somebody kept asking, and then somebody else asked, etc. I'm like, I haven't heard his name with Florida State, but I don't hate that. 6th-year senior that's a mobile quarterback in Mike Norvell's system would work. And it's a very similar system to what Wisconsin runs. They want a quarterback that can run around and make plays if things break down and run RPO. And again, he's Midwest. This would be, in my opinion, a home run for them to be a stopgap for a year and a guy that's going to help you win more games. I picked Wisconsin to win 7 this past year. I was right. They would win 8 or 9 next year, quite possibly, even against a tougher schedule, because at some point he's going to win you a game. Let's be honest. When was the last time you said Wisconsin's got a quarterback that's going to win this game tonight?
Russell Wilson. If we're being honest, it's Russell Wilson.
That's what I was going to say too. He's kind of good. This guy's very similar style. Russell's a little thicker, but the same kind of deal. He can run. He had over 500 or over 600 yards each of the last 3 years for Toledo. The Rockets are a pretty good program. It's one of the better tradition-rich programs in the MAC. They don't get enough, get a shout out to the MAC. They have more talent in that league than people think. And quite honestly, Wisconsin's not in a position to go get Cameron Ward.
Yeah.
Ironic, because that's who they opened with this year. And I'm like, I remember telling him, look, this guy can, I knew that Wisconsin wasn't going to be able to handle him, but there's the money for him is going to be insane. Going back to our first part of this show, I don't think the way Wisconsin's situation works that they're going to be in the Cam Ward sweepstakes. It's going to go out on a limb there. But even so, it may not be bad that it's not. Again, how much do you have? How much do you spend on one guy? The team that takes Cam Ward needs to be really, really, really close to winning it. Not a team that was 8-4 last year. That ain't going to work. Like Auburn wants him, and I'm like, that's great. But is Auburn, are you going to win? I'm not sure. Oregon wants him. I can see that. That might be like, if he goes there, look out. So that's just something to think about.
Well, on the flip side of that, I think it's interesting. We look very much as fans with our team. Like, where are we at? What do we need? Why would Cam Ward go to a team that won 7 games last year without a ton of receiving talent?
Well, here's the deal. I'll just give you the backdrop on this, and I can't get into a whole bunch of specifics on teams and names. But because you can, like grad transfers, we'll just use that as platform. You can go wherever you want if you get your undergraduate degree. You get another opportunity, you got a year left, blah, blah, blah. Well, there are quarterbacks that before they got in the portal that were talking to receivers at other schools. These guys all knew each other from 7-on-7, playing high school, at award shows, at bank, whatever. They meet each other in different ways. They were recruiting each other from across the country before this season was over to go in the portal. I know some guys that they were going to go. And I'm going to leave it at that.
Yeah.
If he's going to go, I will bet. Let's say Cam Ward signed with Wisconsin, just hypothetically. There would be a guy that you and I aren't talking about right now that Cam knows all too well is going to go to Wisconsin too, or else he ain't going.
Right.
Cam would do all the work for you. That's the benefit. But do you have enough NIL for all those guys? Wherever he goes, there's going to be a receiver go there. And you're like, man, that's kind of odd. No, it's not. Cam knew that guy. I guarantee you, wherever he goes, there's going to be one of those. Guarantee it.
Yeah. And it's something you and I have talked about a lot, right? Those type of talents want to play with other types of talent.
100%. Why would you, if you're a receiver, are you going to transfer somewhere without a quarterback? Get the hell out of here. You're going to go somewhere that you can get the ball. Those two positions are connected more than any other in any sport on this planet.
When you mentioned, and again, I never prod you for specifics because I know you hear lots of craziness, but when you mentioned the money for Cam Ward is going to get crazy, what's the ballpark on that?
I think at the end that's 2+ because it'll be some team. It's not a market number. This is what they always like to say. This is an old school saying, you're worth what somebody's willing to pay you. Somebody as in one. 90% of the people will want to pay about $1 million. Somebody is going to say, screw this. I'm 80 years old. I got a bunch of money. I want my school to win. $2 million. That's my guess. I don't know who it's going to be. It could be like, there's no reason Phil Knight shouldn't do that. He can't spend all his money. He can't do it. Why wouldn't, I can't believe that Oregon's not committed to him already. It doesn't make sense to me. They should never lose one of these opportunities.
What do you think there's a time where the return on investment on some of these guys, because right now the portal still feels a little Wild Westy. A lot of people with money have never been able to really flaunt it publicly in a college football landscape to support their teams, are throwing it everywhere.
Right.
Do we get to the point here where some people start to say, gosh, the return on investment on this guy, I dropped 500 for, let's say. He got 3 sacks this year. This quarterback didn't help me win more than 7 games.
That's already happened, and it's a great point. I'm not going to get into specifics on names too, but there's a kid that's at A&M. There's a couple actually that I knew from the recruiting ranks, different positions, etc. Some were guys that I know got NIL. I got paid, and some other guys that went there, they weren't as highly. It's caused a bit of a riff, and I don't know if you saw it. I don't believe this. Evan Stewart, the elite receiver, might go in the portal from there. He's flat out, dude. He made a comment. I didn't see any of that money. You're lying. I ain't believing one iota of that. He was in the 22 class. He might have been the best receiver in the country in 22. Do I really believe Evan than getting cash? Get out of here. But at the same time, the riff, do you think A&M was a really good connected team the last couple of years or anytime recently?
No.
That's part of it. And these kids are leaving. They just hired Mike Elko, which is as good a hire as you could have had, in my opinion. He's got experience East Coast, Midwest, South, all over. Tremendous defensive coach. They still have guys that are defensive guys. Often they still leave it. There's so much rift that he walked into. This is a 2-year cleanup before he starts, in my opinion. Even though it's not his fault, I'm calling it now. A&M fans are not going to be happy because they spent so much money on that 22 class. This season's their junior year. That's when you're supposed to get the full bounty. It's not going to happen.
Right.
They're going to lose 3-4 games because they don't have anything. And he's installing his stuff too. It's just part of it. There's going to be a lot of ticked off people. And I know that going into this year, from talking to somebody that was at A&M, some of that money went down already because some of them were pissed that they weren't winning based on what they'd invested. They have a $16 billion endowment at that institution. They're not void of money. If your wife walks across the ground there in high heels, she might sprout oil. So it's different. But at some point, why are we 8-4?
Right.
We're paying more than anybody. And these are business people. So yeah, it's already happening. A&M's an extreme. But at Wisconsin, where it's more conservative with doing that, I think you need the one guy. It doesn't have to be a consensus. They got to find that one guy, successful warrior, whatever, that adds an extra $200K to get a player, not necessarily this year, but starting in 25. Wisconsin needs to start winning big. Some of the underclassmen and some of the recruiting class take over. And then you add the cherry on top, like Georgia does. I think Clemson's going to take a couple kids finally, which that's a story within itself. Don't get me started on Dabo. I need to have a conversation with him about that, but that's for another day. And then finally, just like Michigan or Alabama, they take 5 kids or less. When you're getting to that point, then you've kind of made it. But until then, your roster, you're building, like Florida State's the random. They had a gazillion transfers and they went undefeated. That is the exception to all except, and hats off to Norvell and his staff. That's not going to happen very often. Maybe once in 10 years. High school first, elite players on top, and that's where the boosters need to be. So there's not as much concern about the return on investment players around them. When you rely on 1 or 2 guys, man, they get banged up, miss 3 games. Good luck on that phone call from the AD to that guy. I wouldn't want to be a part of that.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, man. You get to the point where the roster has built itself, and then you're just using the portal to plug in one spot. We didn't nail this position. Let's fix that.
Correct. Somebody turns pro, somebody's injured. It happens. Nobody, even Kirby, like this year, they weren't as good at D-line. They could have used one more D-lineman. And I'm saying that about Georgia.
Yeah.
We don't want to hear
about Georgia at Wisconsin. We could use 5 more defensive linemen. I don't want to hear about Georgia needing 1 more.
That's what I mean. Like, it's hilarious for me to say that because everybody else, like telling Kirby to go kick rocks if he's bitching,
All right, coming up, we're going to take a quick break. Tucker Friends of the show, last segment of the show, but a good one too. We're going to talk a couple more transfer portal targets with Brian Smith. But first, a quick break for friends of the show over at eBay Motors. eBay Motors is the #1 source to get all your car parts. It's what I've used in the past because you don't have to go into a store and talk to somebody who doesn't really know what they're looking for, and they need every detail on your car. It's just too complicated. eBay saves you all that time. For your ride or die, you've got to keep it alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle, level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, everything is there. eBay Motors has you covered. Over 122 million parts for your #1 ride or die. That's almost as many excuses as PJ Fleck has every time they don't win a game. You'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need, prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. Once again, that's keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. All right, let's get Brian back in. As always, we appreciate when Brian can stop by. We get a little smarter on all this stuff, Brian. It's quickly changing. Like, as somebody who grew up, I'm 40. I grew up on college football. Like the last 5 years has been insane, right? With realignments and NIL and the portal. I mean, I remember when the graduate transfer thing happened and everyone lost their mind. They're like, whoa, a 5th-year guy can leave somewhere. And now it's like, it's the whole cottage industry, man. It's amazing. And speaking of that, go ahead.
I've aged in the last 4 days.
Speaking of that, transfer portal, Penn defensive lineman Joey Slackman, 6'4", 300 pounds. He's really blown up. Wisconsin's had him on campus, but USC's offered, Florida's offered. Thoughts on Joey Slackman, and is this kind of a recruitment when you start seeing those names that is outpacing Wisconsin?
I don't know. This one's hard for me to read because he goes to the University of Pennsylvania. By the way, they have a lot of high SAT. A 1,500 SAT there is like, as common as me taking you to McDonald's. So where does he want to go? I think he's a Northeast guy. He's one of those guys you can tell like by his frame and how he plays. He's not the most limber guy in the world, but he's a tank. He's a true interior, old school 1978 defensive tackle from the Big Ten that wanted to maul you. So, I mean, he's got to have suitors like Miami offered him. He's got from coast to coast. I don't know how you grade something like that because he's an Ivy League guy. That's not my turf. I'll just say it. In this industry that I'm in, you cover 4- and 5-star guard guys because the clicks are like 50 times higher. That's just true. Even a 3-star kid, it's iffy. I don't even know if he had a star out of high school. I don't even know who he is. So I went and put on his film. He's pretty good. He's a powerful guy. But it also sets something else. And this is a small tangent There aren't very many D tackles that are going to go in the portal. Is he as good as many offers that are out there? I don't think so. But again, corner and D tackle, if you're already good, you leave after 3 years, nobody cares. They're that coveted by the NFL. And everybody wants more of them at the college level. So that small number, Wisconsin, he'll have 45 offers. He's going to be a rotational guy if he goes to Florida. So first thing, don't think that he's going to walk in if he plays for the Badgers and have 8 sacks and 14 tackles for loss. It's not going to happen. He's at the Big Ten level. I think he's a 2.5 sack, 8 tackle for loss guy, good in short yardage, but he's not twitchy enough to be a dude. But the number of teams going after him, like within 24 hours, he had like 17 or 18 offers. I was like, whoa. So let me put on the film. And I'm like, I know what elite athletes look like at D-line because I live in Florida. That ain't it. But he's just a house. He will set the edge. Like he's like in Kirby's defense, a true 3-4, he'd be a strong side end or something and just be a run stopper. He'd be great. But he's not a get up the field and get sacks guy. When I think of big NIL money, that's what you want. But he still has all the offers because there are very few defensive linemen in the portal. I mean, it is sparse. So the money, it's still supply and demand. I don't know if he's looking for NIL, but I assume he is. I mean, why wouldn't you want some? Will Wisconsin pay? I'm asking you, like, honestly, do you think they're going to pay for any of these kids if they try to get a big name guy? Because if not, they're not getting them. What do you say? I mean, yay, nay on that. I have no idea. I have none.
Yeah. So Wisconsin is very much, I think a couple schools are leaning this way to, we pay you when you get on campus. You know, we don't, there's obviously, and I don't want to get too into specifics on that, but that's kind of where they're. So if it's one of those players that is going to need upfront, and I know there's people that are in that, you know, this is a very weird gray area stuff.
Well, the good news is most of these kids would enroll in January. So up front is like 2 weeks.
True. That's fair. Yeah.
Otherwise, the kid in the spring one is the one that's more iffy because like they want something in mid-May and they don't enroll till like mid-June. It's like a whole month. Even that can deter somebody.
A month for a kid is a lot. And I say kid,
I know.
Young people.
Yeah.
It's a long time.
They want it now.
Yeah.
And that's it. Until you enroll, they're afraid to hand you any money. And I get it.
Well, your point, I think watching Slackman as well, he only had 4 sacks last year at that level of competition. Your point is correct, but he also feels like that there's always risk, right? You mentioned risk in terms of bringing people in, but you're bringing in an upperclassman from a high academic place who you feel
he'll fit in. He'll fit in. Yeah.
You feel like the safe version of what a transfer portal can be. He's going to play. You know he can be a run stuffer. That's still important.
Heck yeah. Absolutely.
And you need defensive linemen. Let's talk about the other guy, Tyrell Henry, Michigan State transfer entered the portal. Last year, 24 receptions, 195 yards, former high 3-star receiver. Had a pretty good offer list coming out of high school. Arkansas, Penn State, Michigan were all in on him. Ended up at Michigan State. That was kind of that high water point of that Michigan State recruiting NIL Tucker engine to some degree. What are your thoughts on Henry?
I watched his film and what little I could get. And he's a kid that was developing, didn't really play as a freshman, but his second year for the Badgers, it's interesting, or for the Spartans, he had a couple plays you're like, whoa. Like he had a ball on a fade that you're like, you know, that's what Keon Coleman does. That's, you know, what Bolitnikoff winners do. And this is a backup at Michigan. It was just so random, brother. It was so random. And I'm like, well, somebody's going to pay him because, I mean, there are a lot more receivers or D linemen talking about Joey Slackman. But either you have that on film at the collegiate level or you don't. He's a really interesting one because if you believe in your receivers, you believe in your system. I think we all know Wisconsin's got a good coordinator. They just lost their receiver coach, but you'll get another receiver coach and that system fits him. If they got him, I think it's a really good upside pick. And this is what I would call the perfect Wisconsin guy to get the ball rolling. Every time I come on your show, I bitch about receivers because they're not good at Wisconsin. They're just not. At least not traditionally, not by the way I measure it anyway. So if they want to yell at me and send me an inbox, feel free. I'm still going to yell right back at you. They're not making enough plays. This guy made some. And it's not like Michigan State had a whole bunch of dudes throwing in the ball. Like all 3 of their quarterbacks are literally in the portal. It's hilarious. They don't have a Michigan State doesn't have a quarterback.
that
full
place.
scholarship. That's unbelievable. If Wisconsin fans are mad, call one of your Michigan State brethren and friends. Holy crap, they got a whole nother level of problems. But at the same time, you can't lose kids like this if you're Michigan State, especially if he goes right down the road to Madison.
Yeah.
I think it would be a nice pickup because you're not going to get whoever the number one. And I don't know if there's a pure number one unless Evan Stewart goes in. If he goes in, he's number one. Okay. That is a first day draft pick in the NFL, period. There isn't a guy like that in the portal, in my opinion, at receiver yet. But those guys are just doing their deals behind. And as soon as they announce they're in the portal, 6 hours later, they picked a school because they don't want to get they don't want all the people calling them. And that's exactly what I would advise them to do too. And I'm in the industry. I'm just being honest. But to that point, if you get a guy like Henry, you got a couple of kids coming in that you like at receiver, you got the ball started. They need to hit next year. It is so important, no matter what Wisconsin's record is next year, for not only some of these kids to do well, but they need a portal guy. They need to show, hey, we brought him in. In 1 year, he went from X to Y, like that big jump. And then you can start recruiting against Michigan, Notre Dame, Ohio State in the Midwest for some of these receivers. And even Missouri, like Missouri, probably going to have an easier time recruiting now. It's not good for the other school. They got the SEC with them, but Luther Burden and some of these guys, it's getting harder to recruit in the Midwest. They have to hit right away. This is a way to do it. And yeah, I'd take him. I'd take him if I was Michigan. I would take him if I was Ohio State. He's a good football player.
That's great insight. And as always, we're smarter because Brian is able to stop by. I know he's in the hotel room. Wi-Fi held up.
For the most part.
We did good. We covered a lot of territory. Brian, thank you as always, my friend. Have a great weekend, and we appreciate you. By the way, go follow Brian, FB Scout _Florida. Great insight as always.
I appreciate it, sir. Everybody be safe.
Thank you. On Wisconsin, we'll talk tomorrow.